Ta-da! Hey guys, Emma here. Welcome to part 4 of the Petunia Greenhouse build and also the end. I am so excited to share with you the last part of this project, which was honestly really just like the finishing touches, which surprisingly took way longer than I felt like it would, which is why this 3-part series turned into a 4-part series. But I am going to just walk you through everything that we did in part 4, which was basically the installation of the door. We ended up swapping out the windows for vents, so I'll show you guys those. I'll do a time lapse over all the pieces that we finished, and then right at the end I'll catch you up on a few of the changes that we made from the plans that we purchased on Etsy. Check it out. This is the mostly finished structure. You can see I've got one piece left behind here, and this is just holding the door closed because I need to finish the little bit of a door jamb to seal this gap shut, and I also need to put in a door handle. Not included in this footage is me staining the pine trim. When I did the clear coat, it turned it very yellow, and I just really didn't like how much it contrasted the treated lumber that the structure was made out of, so I ended up doing that. I ended up staining it with New American or Old American or whatever the American is. I'll link it down in the description below, the variety of stain color that I added to the pine. I just went right over the clear coat. Also, you will notice here that there is some little unfinished pieces, like I forgot to stain the edge of this board. So we'll come back and do that. And then this is the protective, just like plastic wrapping that is on these aluminum vents, and I clearly have the patience of like a toddler, so I didn't end up finishing pulling this off, but I will do that in the next couple weeks when I have a sunny day to work out on the structure. So enjoy this little sped up version of the process of finishing part 4, and then I'll check back in at the end to talk about some of the changes that we made. Step 1 was installing the 2x4s that we basically just set up as a frame to hold these aluminum vents. You can probably see here actually in the image that there's 3 different holes to be able to attach it, so we just need to provide a little bit more structure. Even though we could have just screwed it on the top and the bottom, we wanted to add some additional 2x4 boards. This also came in handy when doing the wood framing around these vents, which you'll see later on in this video. The number one most time-consuming and pain in the butt part of this project was cutting out the polycarbonate. Anytime we had to cut the polycarbonate, I just felt like there should have been a better way. Utility knives, not ideal. Tin snips, okay, but again, not ideal. It just felt like if you have used polycarbonate before for a project and you found an efficient method to be able to cut it, especially cutting it at an angle or directly across the polycarbonate, shoot me a message in the comments down below because I would love to know for future reference. The nice thing about these vents is that they kind of just slid right into place and they actually stick out just barely from the structure. Once we finished installing the vents, we moved into attaching the door. There was a whole bunch of plastic protective stuff over the glass that I was removing while Richard worked on getting the hinges in place. Like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the door is a 30-inch door and the frame was originally for a 32-inch door, but you use what you got. And when you're doing a project like a greenhouse, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exactly how the plan said. If you're willing to adapt and not, lose sight of the project due to imperfection, then you're good to go, Luckily, when we went to go install the door, it was level and sat perfectly in place like we had planned. So it didn't actually take as much finagling as we originally had thought maybe it might. While Richard finished off the area around the door, I ended up getting a load of gravel delivered at the top of our driveway. I used my little wheelbarrow and just filled in all around the gaps around the entire structure on the inside and the outside to be able to seal off any of the air opening down at the bottom of the structure. I also just used a lot of scrap 2x4s or 2x6s to fill in the biggest part of the gap on the left-hand side of the structure, and that was just because where this greenhouse went in our property was on a pretty slanted part of our driveway, so you just had to accommodate that by filling it in, and instead of putting like 12 inches of gravel to fill it in, I just used a 2x6 and then filled in the gravel the rest of the way. We added a 4x4 at the base of the door frame here just to provide some structure and to provide like a safe space for you to walk in and out. So we screwed that in and attached it, and then I just gravelled in and packed it down. The last step of this project was just finishing off the framing. I had cut these all, measured them all, cut them all in the garage and stained them and left them overnight, and then I was just finishing it off on the last day of this project and just putting them into place. They are not perfect because I forgot to stain the edges, but that is fine. And then to be able to put the top on, since we ended up moving the original location of the windows over farther towards the back to when we replaced it with the vents due to the reduction in overall light, I ended up using just a level and a pencil and marking the roof line to be able to get a relatively close cut for the wood to be able to fit at an angle there. So it's not perfect by any means, so be nice in your comments, but I am happy with how it overall looked, and functionality is really what's most important to me, and that's what I got. Okay, I hope you guys enjoyed part 4 of the Petunia Greenhouse build. I wanted to go over some of the few things that we did differently. I ended up finding this door. It is 30 inch instead of 32 inch, so we will have to do some little adjustments of trim around the gap that we had in the door, because the original door frame was for a 32 inch, but it ended up finding this door locally, and it was just sitting in someone's storage warehouse not being used, and I loved that it had the beautiful glass. So we ended up swapping that out. Not a big deal. The other thing that is different from the original plans, the Petunia Greenhouse plans actually called for windows to be in this section of the greenhouse. And so we decided to actually swap out the windows for vents. And then when we were going to install the vent right there, my father-in-law had the idea to push it all the way back here because the aluminum instead of the window is going to block out a lot of light. And so to reduce the amount of light reduction, we pushed it back towards the corner. So that's why we ended up swapping that out. This is what the vents look like from the inside. This is the bar that you pull down to be able to open them. Push it up to be able to close them, so it's just a manual lever, which I kind of liked the idea of that versus installing a window. I was also having a hard time finding some windows, and I didn't want to have to make our own, so we went with the vent installation. I ordered these off of Amazon. I will link them in the description below. They are meant for greenhouses. Last summer, my friend Shannon moved out of town. She had a whole bunch of these cedar wooden baskets on her porch railing, so she gave them all to me. So I think there was 2, 4, 6 of them. So I'm using these. I'm going to fill them with dirt and use them as like herb gardens so that they are in the greenhouse kind of permanently. And then we can also do things that have vines and things that will trail down. So I've got these 2 on this side. We've got one right here a little bit lower on this side. This side we've got one a little bit lower, and then 2 more up over here. Also in the video you could see that I gravelled in along the entire edge. That was to seal any of the air gaps that we had down below. These plans, I couldn't find any information about being able to seal the giant like 3 or 4 inch gap that was up at the top. So I just took some leftover bits of our pine trim and I just put it up here to kind of fill in as much of the gaps as possible, just to reduce the overall amount of air that was going out. And obviously you can see here that I've got a little gap all around the door because we had a 30 inch instead of a 32 inch. So I'm working on that to get that finished off as well. Last part of this project, which will not be included in this video series, but will be on my channel at some point, I will be installing shelves. So probably about 1.5 feet wide, and then about like the length of half of this back wall, so about 4 or 5 feet long, and then another 4 or 5 feet. I will be doing it similar to this, where it will have a 2x4 frame, hardwire cloth over it, and then I'll actually attach it with hinges so that you can lift it up and down. My friend has this in her greenhouse, and I really love that when the plants get big enough and they need to go down onto the ground because they're too tall, you can just lift up and hold up the shelf and then have the plants be on the ground so that they have the more vertical height available. Overall, I really like how this greenhouse turned out. It is a 7-foot by 10-foot walk-in greenhouse. As you can see, I've got some plants, seeds started down here below. That will be nice to put on a table eventually. But overall, it looks really good. And I love having this glass door. I think it lets in a lot of light. It's only 40 degrees here in Sitka today, but I'm just in the greenhouse right now. And without even sealing in all the gaps and everything, it says that it's 55. So it is holding 15 degrees more, and it is just overcast. It's not actually sunny at all. I bet if it was sunny, it would be up into the mid 60s at least in here. So that gives me a lot of hope for the summer, thinking about how this greenhouse is going to maintain its heat. So I'm just feeling excited about that. It's already feeling good. Like, I'm in my puffy because it's cold outside, but in here, like, I can tell I would already be hot if I was moving around in here doing anything. Okay guys, that is it for part 4 of the Petunia Greenhouse build. This is the last video of that series. I will be posting in the next week or so a long form video of like a time lapse of the entire build. It will not have any audio voiceover from myself. It will just be musical. So if you enjoy just watching kind of a satisfying time lapse of a build of a greenhouse, go ahead and check that out. I'll link it down in the description below as well as soon as the video goes up and is live for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this 4-part video series of the Petunia Greenhouse build. I am so excited to be able to grow some things in here this summer. My father-in-law, who was the kind of lead on this project, I'm like the inspiration and the laborer, and he is like the brains that actually makes it happen and makes it structurally sound. So I'm just so grateful to have him. I feel like I just keep roping him into projects around the house and around the yard, and he has just been so helpful, and I just owe a big shout out to him. So thanks, Richard, for the help on the Petunia Greenhouse. Thanks so much for watching. See you later.